welcome back to The Movies Made Us Do It. Me and Matt are back. How are you doing, Matt?
Good, sir. Yourself?
I am very well, yes. We are doing our Halloween episode. We're late because by the time this goes out, it'll probably be after Halloween. But sod it, it's Halloween weekend for us, so we're going to do another horror movie. We did a horror comedy last time, so this time we're going to do something that's not funny at all. It's just
certainly got amusing lines in it.
It's got some amusing lines in it, but it is one of the most depressing horror movies ever. We are covering 1986's The Fly, the David Cronenberg version of The Fly, adapted from a French short, I think. French horror short from 1957, and then adapted as a film in 1958, and then reimagined, taken in a completely different direction outside of There Are Teleportation Pods by David Cronenberg in 1986. This film for me is up there with The Thing for practical stuff.
Oh yeah,
you know,
definitely.
When I think practical and I think the end of practical effects, I think The Fly is really up there for me. The Fly and The Thing are kind of pinnacle.
You got Fly, Thing, and probably American Werewolf. I think are the sort of
absolutely.
They're the sort of benchmarks, aren't they?
They are, and it was
sort of, it's kind of all downhill after that.
I always see them as kind of the fitting send off to practical before we started fucking around with CG and all that kind of stuff. I mean Evil Dead 3 actually as well. Late 90s or mid 90s, wasn't it?
True.
That does well with practical.
That's got some, there's some good stuff in that as well.
Yeah, which I think was 95, and then like a year later there was Jurassic Park, so it was kind of like, oh, that's literally the last one to go full.
Jurassic Park was a pretty good balance actually.
Oh, it was superb, and it still looks great to this day.
I think the CG. It's one of the few movies of that time where the CG still holds up, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's because it's used so sparingly.
Yeah.
But in any case, today we're talking about The Fly. When did you first see The Fly, and what was your impression of it? How did you come across it? Because I know how I came across it. I'm curious how you came across it.
I think it's another VHS job. I think pretty sure I watched it. I think it's another hire from the video shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
would have been how I watched it. Yeah, and probably with a couple of other horror movies at the same time.
Sure, a horror marathon.
And I think I was probably going through a Cronenberg phase at that time, actually.
I mean,
because I think I saw a lot of Cronenberg. I watched. Is it Rabid and Videodrome roughly the same sort of time? I
adore Videodrome.
I do. It's
such a good
weird movie.
And these are like peak Cronenberg movies. To be honest,
peak Cronenberg's body horror stage.
Yeah. So now
he makes these really good sort of like dramas now, doesn't he? Mostly, it's like
I think he just got it out of his system. He went there, and I think he went as far as he could with it, and he was like, "Cool, I'm out, and now I'm going to go do something else."
And I think he's done pretty well as well. From like things like what's that Russian gangster one?
Oh wait, History of Violence. Is that the one?
That's the one. Is
that Cronenberg?
That's not the one I'm thinking of, but.
That might not be Cronenberg. I might have just made that
History of Violence. History of Violence is Cronenberg, but that's not the one. It's not the one I was thinking of. Eastern Promise was the one I was thinking.
Oh yes,
but said, History of Violence again. If you watch that movie and then showed them this and said,
you'd just be like, these are different people.
Director.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He did a really good job. I think the last sort of proper freaky one he did was probably Existence, wasn't it?
Quite possibly, yeah. That's a film I haven't seen enough, actually. I haven't seen Existence for a long time. Long time.
Cosmopolis was quite weird, but not sort of in the same vein. It was very... I really liked that. That was one of the first movies where I actually took Patterson seriously.
Yeah.
So I mean... I bloody love Cronenberg.
So do I, and this for me is kind of peak Cronenberg time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess let's go through the plot as we tend to do now that we can't watch these films together. We just kind of talk through them together. It's kind of very different take to the original, the first movie. In that the first movie is kind of already happened, and a good portion of the opening is just like, is she mad? She killed her husband, and why did she kill her husband? And then you kind of find out through the flashback how it came to that. This movie, we literally open with the teleportation pods are built. He's done it to an extent. He's done it as far as he can so far. So we open with
it starts off with the party, doesn't it?
It does,
so
yeah.
We get this like this. Is it like it's like some sort of
I think
scientific...
it's a press event for Bartok Science.
Yes, that's it. Bartok Science.
Yeah, the who I messaged you last night because I was rewatching this. I haven't watched it for a long time, and I think I just texted you like, Jesus Christ, Bartok is a complete asshole in this. I hadn't realized how we'll get to it, but the bit in the clothes store, I was like, wow, you are mental. Like, you are coming across like a mental ex. So Seth Brundle meets Veronica, who's a science journalist, at this Bartok Science event. It's kind of like a Meet the Press event. And Bartok is, amongst many projects, they're funding Seth Brundle's work. Which is kind of interesting because he says later on that no one really knows what he's making. They're kind of... No. He somehow swindled these companies into sending him stuff and funding him to do science, but he's not going to say exactly what he's doing.
He says he's cheap.
Yeah.
And apparently he I think the Stathis says at some point that he looked him up and he nearly got a Nobel Peace Prize, I think, or for science at some point. Nobel Prize.
So they were like, this guy's obviously a genius.
For some previous project. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's obviously proved himself. So he's like, he said he's cheap, so they just like don't bother looking over me. They just like fund me, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, you get the impression that Bartok Science is huge. So you're kind of like, to them, I guess he's just small fry. They probably don't even realize that they've still got him on the books. He's just there getting paid. Yeah. So he basically is smitten with Veronica, I guess. He's lusting after her, and
she finds him sort of weirdly charming, which I've often thought is like, how is he weird?
He comes across like mental to me.
Yeah, and my wife was like, he's not charming. Why is she going home with this guy? He's nuts.
The way he stares at her is like, dude, this is not someone you should go home with at all. But she does. He takes her back to his warehouse, which I always thought was an awesome home. Always loved those warehouse homes. Like in Wayne's World, I was like, oh, I love that. Like, it just looks so cool. Anyway, he takes her back to his...
He's got a completely empty warehouse.
Huge.
Like in this abandoned place. And he takes the top floor.
Mm.
Why would you take the top floor?
Take the bottom floor. Yeah. So, he takes her back to his warehouse home and shows her his invention, which is two, what he calls telepods. And
there's three. There's a one that he said was the prototype that doesn't work anymore.
Oh, of course, he activated it at the end. Sorry, I knew there were three at the end, but I thought he'd built it. You're right. So he's got three. One was a prototype. Two, he's got working... somewhat working anyway. So
what makes me laugh is he says to her, he actually doesn't know how it works.
No, he's like
he basically asks for them to make stuff, and they make stuff, and he puts it together.
Yeah, and so he's and a part of this movie that we'll come to in a minute is actually him trying to figure out how his own invention works. So he's built this thing. It's a teleportation pod. So you put one thing in pod A, press a button, and it comes out of pod B. He convinces Veronica to give up something that she owns, and she gives him like one of her tights.
The weirdest thing to give him as well. It's like she's got like a jacket. She's got like a handbag full of stuff.
Yeah. At that point, I thought she was coming on really strong. It was really weird because in the opening scene, you're like, Seth is coming on so strong. He's creepy as fuck. There's no way she's going to go back home with him. Then she does, and then she's coming on to him massively at this point. I was like, what is going on? Like, these two are just both crazy. Which could be said about all the
mentions
characters.
When they're driving to the thing, he mentions his motion sickness. He doesn't like traveling.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, his main reason for making these pods is because he wants to instantaneously travel as opposed to getting in vehicles and traveling because he doesn't like it.
It's a nice... It's nice character building and backstory, and it's not in your face, you know? Like, I feel like a modern movie would show him on a plane at first being terribly sick and just like, oh, I can't deal with this. You know, a modern movie would just spell that out and just, you know, hammer that point home. But here, it's just a nice mention when they're in the back of the cab, I think. He just says, like, oh, I'll get motion sickness. So she gives him... her tights, I think, and then he...
it's a stocking.
Stocking, sorry, yes, it is, isn't it? Because, yes, he really slowly takes it off as well, and it's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So he teleports it to the teleportation pod, to pod B. She is like, you are joking. This cannot be real. And he basically says, no, it's true. But the problem is, he can only teleport inanimate objects. He can't yet do living tissue, living beings, which is his ultimate goal. And he doesn't want Bartok Science or the media or the press or anyone breaking the story until he's successfully teleported himself from one pod to another. I should say as well that he convinces her to agree to not do anything until it's finished before she kind of sees what it is.
First off, because she's recording him, and he doesn't.
And he's like, no.
It's like, and it's, the other thing that makes me laugh about that as well is it's like he's like, you told a journalist, you knew she's a journalist. There's no way she's not going to do a story on you. It's like
on literally teleportation.
It's simple.
Yeah.
So he does convince her that not to do it.
He sweet talks her with, like, you get to document everything I do from now on. You get the full story. So I guess he does make it quite appealing to her. It's an exclusive, and you're going to have all the footage you want of me trialing all of this. Now, in 1958's The Fly, you've got a couple of moments where there's while he's trying to develop the teleportation pod and excuse me, and his trial and errors, and you've got one where a cat disappears and you just hear it meowing in space.
You hear it meowing, don't you?
Yeah. And another one which I think they used here, or they tried to reference here, in Cronenberg's own demented, horrific way. The original movie, you've got it's an ashtray that someone gave them as a wedding present, and she's like, oh, you know, they were joking because it says made in Japan on the bottom. They put it from pod A to B, and then it comes out backwards, and they're like, oh, look, it's all backwards, it doesn't work right. Fucking David Cronenberg's like, nah, fuck that. A baboon is put in and literally turned inside out. Like, oh, backwards, like the original was like this really charming kind of half funny moment where they're like, oh, look, it says made in Japan backwards. Here it's like, holy shit, inside out baboon.
And it's what an effect as well.
It's an amazing effect, but really, God, it's horrible.
Well, we've skipped a bit though. We've skipped the where she talks to Stathis first.
She does. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, she plays him the tape and stuff, and he says it's a joke. He's like a magician's cabinet.
It's a trick, and you fell for it.
Vegas sort of thing.
Yeah,
and he basically. That's right because he says no, it's all a load of rubbish, and he says he's going to go, and then doesn't it's then that Seth turns up at the office and says that's when he says he'll give her the exclusive.
That's right. You're absolutely right, because she comes out saying like Bartok doesn't believe you, and he's like, oh, thank God, like this is perfect. Like, he thinks I'm mental. That's great. And then he takes her for burger and chips.
Yes.
And that's when he sweet talks her and all of that. And then the baboon dies horribly. Or one of them. There's two. Although you've just told me the other one fucking dies horribly as well, which is in a cutscene that I didn't know about.
Well, we'll talk
get to
about
that
later on.
Okay.
But one of the things that made me sort of nicely sort of smile and was the camera that she's using as a Betamax.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was brilliant.
It's better quality. it's better quality. It's the best quality you would get at the time. It makes sense that as a professional journalist, she'd be using the best stuff. Yeah. Betamax was always superior. God damn it!
It was.
I will never let people forget.
The bloody Americans, like, though, completely sidetracked it.
They did, but it was by far the better quality. So there we go. So yes, you're right. Though she is using a Betamax recorder. So Seth and Ronnie basically start to begin a relationship.
Now the problem I think I have, one of the problems I have with this movie in the early stages is I presume that this is done over like days and weeks, because they don't. That one thing they don't do.
The passage of time is not addressed well.
Yeah,
I agree.
They do not say. It feels like it's all done in like 2 days at the beginning, and I don't actually think it is. I get the feeling that this is supposed to be over a couple of weeks.
I think
because
we're
the
meant to
relationship
be.
feels like. It's like all of a sudden they're buffing, and you're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I agree.
That was bloody quick.
I agree, and it. I think the idea is that after the initial bit with the stocking, it's taking him a long time to figure it out from that point. The movie doesn't. It doesn't communicate that terribly well, so you're right. It feels like all of a sudden they're in a serious relationship, and it's like, whoa, what the hell?
And that's when during the lovemaking he gets this he basically lies on a chip that basically sticks in his back, and she takes it out, sort of thing, and it's almost
he's like it'll be fine, and she's like, you need a fucking tetanus jab now, dude. That's not
exactly.
That is not good,
especially in this apartment. It's fucking filthy.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, nah, it's fine.
I mean, it gets a lot worse, but it's dirty already,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, tetanus is the least of his worries by the end of this movie, but
yeah, I do also like the fact that he establishes when he says to her, "Do you always wear the same clothes? And do you ever wash or anything?" And he's like, "I change every day." And he's like, goes to his wardrobe, and he's just got this like the same outfit all the way through. He's like a Scooby-Doo character. It's like
he said it worked for Einstein, so it works for him.
Yeah, he said Einstein did this so that he doesn't have to think about what he's wearing.
Yeah,
it's like I like that. It's quite cool.
So is part of
it's
trying
always like
to
the technology sort of like already betraying him, sort of thing, with the thing in the back.
Yes, that's interesting. Actually, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you're right. He's already been stabbed in the back by technology, as it were. So in trying to figure out what's wrong with the device that he doesn't really fully understand that he's made, he decides to transport.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. He decides to transport a steak. He transports a steak from one pod to the other, and then he cooks a normal steak and the transported steak and gives it to Ronnie. Ronnie then tries both, and she says it tastes synthetic, it doesn't taste right. And that gives Seth the idea that the machine doesn't know
it's a dumb machine.
It's doing its interpretation of a steak. Yeah. It's not transporting the steak.
Tell it to do.
Yeah. It's not transporting the steak. It's disintegrating the steak down to its basic elements and then trying to interpret the steak.
Making an approximation of what it thinks steak is.
Yeah, it's that old argument.
What it's told steak is.
Yeah, and it goes back to that old wonderful argument of, does everybody in Star Trek die every time they transport?
Yeah.
But we won't get into that.
I mean,
That's a
I'm with Dr. McCoy. Those things are let's not play with transport.
Do you know what? One day we'll talk through Star Trek the motion picture, and I want to talk about that because that fucking scene. There's literally a scene where that guy goes hideously wrong. Those two, they get like morphed into one thing through the transporter, and then like 5 minutes later, Bones he forces Bones to transport, and then he's like, "Oh, you stupid fucking twat! Like it's fine. There's nothing wrong with transport. Get on with it." And it's like, dude, you literally just saw two people die horribly like 5 minutes ago, and now you're giving like McCoy shit for not wanting to transport. It's like, what? I think he's got a point.
Absolutely.
So he figures out that it's an interpretation of a steak rather than a steak itself. So he's then inspired to kind of continue working on the telepod to make it understand what living tissue is.
Yeah.
I guess that it's very. I guess it's not very simple, but it's simple for the machine to understand, a plant pot, but it's not very easy for it to understand a plant. If it's living tissue, it doesn't quite understand.
It's got lots more sort of. It's got so much more like
complexity
bits in it than a simple like bit of plastic or whatever.
Yeah, or stocking.
And I think this is we forgot. I think it's at some point we've also got the bit with the where she goes home and where she goes to her apartment, which is actually near the beginning, and Stathis is in her bathroom having a shower.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I felt scummy, and it's like you are scummy. you are horrible.
You literally are.
What is wrong with you?
That guy.
And that's when you find out that he's her ex-boyfriend, and he's got a key to her apartment. He just let himself in. It's like, oh man, take a fucking hint.
John Getz, that's his name. He is amazing in this movie. In terms of this film, I must admit, watching it yesterday, I was like, John Getz is the standout performance in this movie for me. He is so unlikable and horrible.
He is
amazing performance. You're right. Yeah.
When at the end of that scene, she asks him for the key back, and he refuses to give it to her.
Yeah, straight up refuses.
It's like, love, get a locksmith now.
Yeah.
Change the fucking locks.
Too right.
You do not want that guy in your house. He's freaky as fuck.
And
you find out that he was like her professor or something.
Yeah. It was like a student teacher thing when she was like a kid, I guess, or not a kid, but a young adult.
No.
Yeah.
It's all wrong. Stop it.
Horrendous.
And then that's when you get the thing with the clothes, because she goes out to a bit later. She goes out to buy him new clothes, she gets him a new jacket and
then Stathis turns up like a psycho, because he obviously stalked her to find her there. Like, he knew where she was. He was following her, presumably.
She comes out of the thing. When she comes out of his complex thingy, he's outside in his car. He's been in his car all night, waiting for her. And he stalks. It's like, and she sort of turns around and he's just like there, almost grinning at her. It's like, what is wrong with you?
You've got the scene.
He's just so weird.
He's so weird. And in the middle of this department store, in this clothes section, he's just like, "Are you fucking him?" And then he turns around to this poor guy who's just working there, and he's just like, "What do you think? Should she fuck him? Should she get with him?" And this guy's like, "Oh, I'm just here to put clothes up on the hook."
I did like that. I did think that the line was when she says she says to him, he's onto something. He's onto something big, and he says, "What, like his dick?" That's actually quite a good line.
Oh dear.
Like, complete stalker, and then he sort of he flances off sort of thing, and she buys these clothes. It's like, bloody hell, there's something really wrong with that bloke. And actually, one of the things I also like as well is the building that the journalists are in. Is it the technology building, or is it whatever it is? That building, when he shoots the building, it's so fucking sinister.
Yeah.
It's a simple building, but for some reason the way he shoots it makes it look really fucking menacing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Cronenberg's kind of personal opinions and things are, but you almost get that that Tolkien vibe from him, where he's like, like technology's bad, and certainly you get that kind of feeling from movies like this and like Videodrome as well. You get the same kind of thing, although slightly different, I suppose. It's more like commercialism and that kind of stuff with Videodrome, but still, again, it's that technology. It's he's almost feels like he's anti-tech, and you're right, the way they film that building is very sinister. It kind of would fit perfectly into like Ghostbusters, when they do that kind of making a perfectly normal building feel really horrible. Yeah, he does that really well. So going from Psycho A, we go back to Psycho B, as Ronnie basically says to Seth, "Look, I've got to go deal with my mental ex. I need to get him out of my life. I need to scrape him off my shoe."
Well,
and then
before she comes back, he teleports the baboon, doesn't he?
Yes, sorry, yes, he does. Yes,
he teleports the baboon, and
successfully
and
this time. So this is the twin brother of the baboon that died is teleported successfully. He wants to show.
That's when she comes back.
Yeah,
and he's wants to celebrate with champagne and stuff.
That's
and
right.
then she says. And he kind of loses it with her because he says, oh, he's your boyfriend, blah, 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 that sort of thing. And she's like, no, he's an ex, but I've got to make sure, I've got to finish it.
Yeah.
And she leaves, and then he, gets all huffy
just
about it.
Goes crazy about it. And I was like, to be honest, I thought she was perfectly reasonable in that scene. She was just like, no, he's my ex. I just need to get him out of my life. Like, cool, go do that. I understand.
Yeah.
No, he's like, he just decides to drink the whole bottle to himself, get drunk, get angry, get jealous, and then at one point during his drunken night, he looks at the baboon and he's like, "You're fine, fuck it," and just gets in the teleport.
Because he does say to her about she says about the baboon, and he says, I'm going to have to send it off to get it tested to make sure it's fine.
Months
and she says,
of testing.
Well, that's it. He says it could take weeks or months to test it. and it's like, so I won't. It's like, and you get the impression that he's not going to go through because that would be crazy. But by this point, he's like a bottle of champagne in, and he's
and he's just upset and just being an idiot. So
and as my wife said last night, it was like we was watching it, and she said, "Why is he teleporting a baboon? One, baboons can't be cheap.
No,
Two,
where did he get them?
Like difficult
Two of
to get
them.
hold of. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, why wouldn't you start with a rat or something? Why a baboon? It's like a huge mammal.
I'm assuming that Bartok Science just had baboons, and they were like, "Fuck it.
Yeah.
If you're doing testing, do it on a baboon."
Yeah.
But it's one thing to have it in the science building or in their labs, but just to give it to some random dude in a warehouse, okay. But in any case,
the baboon was obviously, it's a wild baboon, so it wasn't sort of like well trained or anything. But apparently it was sort of like cowed by Goldblum. Because Goldblum is so big and imposing, it kind of like it basically saw it as its like leader. So it kind of behaved itself around Jeff Goldblum, which I think is quite funny.
That's an interesting story.
There was I think one scene where it was freaked out by the light in the pod,
right,
and it ripped the door off.
Oh god!
And I think Jeff Goldblum managed to sort of calm it down, and it was fine.
Oh, bless it. So speaking of the baboon, this is one of my favourite scenes, like pivotal scene in the movie, really. Seth is drunk and decides he's gonna teleport himself. He does set up a camera for Veronica, which is, he's still thinking of her, even though he's angry and upset. And he films it. So he starts a camera, he gets in the teleportation pod, and...
Well, he's talking to the baboon, isn't he? He's talking to the baboon, and he apologises for turning his brother inside out.
Yes, yeah.
And while he's, like, kind of persuading himself to do it, there's a fly buzzing around the baboon, and the baboon's like, swatting at it and things like that. So you get that like build up to him going into the pod.
You get this wonderful scene. Well, I think it's really kind of it's humorous to me, even though it's not really intended. But I just love this scene where Seth decides in his drunken, upset, jealous rage, he's going to teleport himself, sets up the camera, he gets in there, and then there's this fly going around, and the baboon sees the fly, and the baboon sees the fly go in the teleportation pod, and I almost feel like the baboon's like trying to be like, mate, don't do it. Like there's something in there.
I think exactly the same thing.
He's trying to warn him.
It genuinely looks like the baboon's going, don't do it. No,
he's like, mate. He's like, mate, you haven't seen this. Look, there's a fly. But Seth doesn't notice. Because he even comes up to the pod door, doesn't he? And he's like, dude.
He does, yeah.
I love the idea that this baboon's like trying to help him. It's like, no.
I also think it's really funny that there's a little window on the side of the thing, which looks like its only purpose is to show the fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, that's a really good window there for no apparent reason other than that.
Yeah, there would be like zero reason for a window to be in that position, but it does make a great shot. So it's kind of like, it's a movie.
The pods are they're based on is it the gaskets on Cronenberg's car or something?
Oh really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the piston heads or something. You can tell I know a lot about engines.
Yeah, me too. The only cars I drive are like Nintendo, so I don't understand any of it.
Is where I get off.
So he teleports himself, and he is normal. Well, he's better than normal actually. He's like he's got. Well, him and Ronnie reconcile first, I guess. They make up. Yeah. He says, "I teleported myself." She's like, "I can't believe you did that without me." He says, "Oh, don't worry, I filmed it for you." But he then discovers that, or he thinks he's been made better by teleportation.
Yeah,
he finds
full of energy.
He's full of energy. He's got increased strength. He's more sexual. So he thinks that going through the teleportation has purified him. He's like, the machine took me and made the perfect version of me.
Makes me better.
Yeah. So
and that's you get that. I quite like that. The scene with the weird gymnastics is like, wow, that bar over there came in really handy, didn't it?
Yeah. Although he looked like he's in pretty good shape anyway. To be fair, in this movie. So you'd think he does work out to do something, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he.
And that's when we also get the during their love making, which it suggests they've been doing it for hours.
Yeah.
She finds the hairs on his back.
Yes, which are like.
That are coming out of the cut that was made by the chip earlier on.
So that and while they're having coffee, he puts like a mountain of sugar into his cup.
Yeah.
The first kind of indications that something is wrong or not right.
Yeah, because he doesn't stop talking. I mean, even for Jeff Goldblum, he doesn't stop talking.
Yeah, even for Jeff Goldblum,
well, he's just ladling spoon after spoon of sugar into this into his coffee, and it's not even a big coffee cup.
No, it's like a medium small coffee cup that he's just pouring the sugar in.
Just pour the whole.
I think she even says, "Do you want some like coffee with your sugar?"
Yeah.
So she finds these hairs while they're having sex, she cuts
them off and
cuts them off
to send away, sort of thing.
Yeah, but before too long, Seth starts to become
erratic,
violent. Not violent. He's not really violent, but certainly
almost.
arrogant.
I mean, I think he starts shouting. He has these sort of violent outbursts.
Yeah,
where he doesn't.
He's manic.
Or anything.
He's kind of manic.
He's very sort of pointy and sort of like you're jealous. You're and the outbursts are full on. They're really quite.
He's terrifying.
Frightening.
He's quite scary.
He does. It's. I mean, Jeff Goldblum is always weird. I think I was saying to my wife that it's like people like Keanu Reeves and stuff get shit for playing the same character every time. Jeff Goldblum is just Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, he kind of is.
I don't think I've ever seen Jeff Goldblum play anything different other than what he is. Just fucking weird.
Yeah,
which is not a bad thing because he's still a good actor. It's just Jeff Goldblum. But he does a lot of really good eye acting in this movie.
He does, and towards the end, his head movements, that kind of fast fly movement is awesome. So good. So he becomes arrogant and like manic and almost violent. Certainly scary.
Well, he basically tries to. He wants to drag her into the pod and put her in the pod, and she refuses.
Yeah, he's like, look, this purified me, it'll purify you. And by this point, she's like, no, something is wrong here. You're not right. You need to get some help. And he completely flips out. The idea that he should go to hospital or see anyone. He's like, no, I'm perfect. You're jealous. And basically kicks her out.
Yeah.
Because what is it he says? He says something like, if you don't want to be the perfect couple. He's on about being the perfect couple, isn't he? And he's like, well, if you don't want to be part of the dynamic duo, then you go and I'll find Mrs. Right,
Yeah.
And it's all very manic, and she's just like, what the fuck is going on?
What just happened? Yeah. he went from 0 to 1,000.
1,000, yeah. And he basically kicks her out and goes to a bar. And
then he goes. I love the fact that he's like he just puts his trousers on and stuff, and it puts his jacket over his bare chest. It's like, ooh, sexy.
Yeah, he looks terrifying. And by this point, his face is starting to go a bit weird as well. Like he's got bumps on his face. And...
like, acne or something, isn't it? And, he's got more twitchy, and he's constantly eating chocolate bars.
Yes. So he goes to this bar, comes on to this woman immediately. Tawny, I think her name is. And he's like being a real sleaze to her. There's two guys having an arm wrestling contest, and one guy is just like, look, fuck off. That's my girl. Leave her alone.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've got $100. It says I can beat you in an arm wrestling match. And they all laugh it off like he's joking. Then he literally provides, like, here's 100.
He puts that up, and he also said, and then he says, "Oh,
and
I also
get
to take her home." It's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah, but then to make it worse, that instead of this guy just punching Seth in the face, he's like, "I don't worry about it. It's easy money," you know. And it's like, what? No, so you're okay with this? Like her being, and she's got no saying it. He's just like, no.
And I also thought these guys do not look like they've got $100 on them.
No, no. I don't think they're going to be good for it.
No. Well, apparently the big guy that he arm wrestles, he's a famous Canadian boxer. Apparently.
Oh, is he really? He looked quite built. He certainly looked like someone you wouldn't want to mess with.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
So the arm wrestling contest happens, and he basically leaves his just snaps his wrist. This guy's wrist gives him like a compound fracture, and it's all very nasty, and the bone's kind of sticking out.
Great effect.
It's a wonderful effect. And then he just immediately grabs Tawny and goes back to the warehouse.
Up, grabs her and goes off. And I love this. Like then it's like this girl is like she says, "Oh, what do you think I am, a hooker?" And he's like. And it's like, honestly, I think you're acting kind of like one. You're just going along with it. Yeah,
she just like literally goes along. She's like, how dare you? Do you think I'm a hooker? And then immediately just like goes along with it. It's like, okay.
Goes off with him. It's like, yeah.
So...
And you get this thing where he takes her back to the place, and she sort of like collapses at the foot of these stairs. She's like, I'm so tired. Haven't you got a lift or anything? And he says, yes, there's a lift. And
why do you live on the top floor of this building that you apparently have the whole run of? So he picks her up and just runs upstairs with her.
Takes her up, and then you get this sort of like scene where it's like she's sort of like lounging in her pants and her jacket and nothing else, and she's watching him teleport himself again.
Yeah. They then have sex, and he's trying to convince her then to go through the machine herself. She is not happy with this idea. She's just like, no, not doing that, not doing it. And then Ronnie turns up because he says there's nothing to be afraid of.
Hang on, man. We lost connection then.
Oh, did we? I do apologise. Yeah. So we they have sex.
The last thing I said, I think, before it booked off was about Tawny looking there naked, or almost naked.
Yes, so she's there almost naked, and Seth is teleporting himself. He then says to her, step in the teleporter and teleport as well. She is dead against it, and he's like, there's nothing to be afraid of. And then Ronnie turns up and is like, you should be afraid.
Be very afraid. That is such a great line.
It's a wonderful line.
That has been used in so many things since this movie, but it's so good.
It's a great line. And then Seth, she's like, who the fuck is this? And Seth is like, oh, I didn't tell you I live with my mother.
I live with my mother.
You dick. So Tawny is like, fuck this, I'm out of here, grabs her stuff and leaves, leaving Seth with Ronnie. And Ronnie says, like, look, there is something clearly wrong with you. I took that hair, and no one knows what it is. The closest they can tell is it is something insectoid. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Something is really wrong. You need help. And again, he refuses. And he throws Ronnie out and basically says, leave me alone.
And that's when you start seeing the first evidence of him falling apart.
Yes, so we get his face starts to change. You get the fingernails start to fall out.
His fingernail comes off, and it's like he gets pus.
Oh, it's gross. That scene might be like one of the grossest scenes in the movie.
It is horrible, isn't it?
It's absolutely disgusting. I've also got a thing, like, there's very few things with movies or horror sequences that get to me, but nails and teeth are the two things.
Nails and teeth is
Like I watched during the pandemic, I rewatched because it came on Netflix. I rewatched American History X, amazing movie. I cannot watch that scene.
Seen American History.
It's a great movie.
I know the scene though. It's the stir
the teeth on curb scene. I cannot watch it.
I've never got round to seeing that one.
And it's a very powerful scene anyway. But teeth and nails, man.
Yeah,
every time.
There's one. The one that I always think of is the one in Stir of Echoes.
Yeah.
It's where they basically where it's revealed what happened to her, and it's also got a scene where he goes for him as well. It's like, oh no, this is just grim.
Yeah, I can't.
And a similar one as well. Also, there's the what is it? Poltergeist.
Yes.
When the guy goes to the mirror, it's like, and he starts tearing his flesh away. It's like, I think body horror in general is one that does get me.
It does. It's just something about fingernails and teeth that are just like the worst for me. So yeah, this scene might be the worst one for me of all the scenes in the movie. But yeah, so it's gross and there's pus and all of that kind of stuff. So he realizes that something's gone wrong at this point, and he starts to interrogate the computer. And he's like,
he gets read out of what his original teleportation happened, and it basically tells him that there was a fly in the mix.
Fly in there, and he says, like, did he asks the computer, he's like, if the other element is the fly, did Brundle absorb the fly?
Absorb it? It says
no. Like, they're like spliced on genetic level is what comes back. It's like, no, I completely mangled you guys.
Yeah.
Computer, and I love it. I mean, it's just matter of fact. The computer's like, nope, you're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like the fact that he's now wearing gloves as well, which is because his fingers are sort of like rotting, and he's like, wearing gloves to type and stuff. And also, is it? Oh no, that's a bit later on with the bit with the voice.
The bit with the voice.
Yeah. Is it later?
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, that is later on. Yeah, when he's talking to the computer.
Yeah, that's later.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's basically already made like Alexa in back in the 80s. So he begins to it just continues to deteriorate over time to the point where he gets so scared that he contacts Ronnie again.
So we've got it's he basically calls her and says it's been 4 weeks, but he wants to see her again.
And I'm losing body parts now. Things are serious.
Yeah.
He reconnects and brings her over. And like by this point he is fucked up. He is a big mess.
He's all lumpy and bumpy and just thoroughly unpleasant.
And he has called himself Brundlefly. And he does this really
and the apartment is an absolute complete state. There's like food and remains and sweet packets everywhere.
Yeah, and he does this really funny but gross scene where he gets Ronnie to set up a camera and he films himself eating, and he's like, hey kids, this is how Brundlefly eats, and basically
because
he vomits on the food.
He vomits the stuff. Apparently, which is honey milk and what was it? Honey milk and something else. I can't remember what the other thing was. But yeah,
absolutely gross. So he vomits and digests food in front of her on camera. And after filming, he then basically says to her, "Look, oh no, does she?"
No, I think his ear falls off, doesn't it?
His ear falls off, and he's like, I'm scared, and she hugs him. And I was like, I'm not even sure I'd hug him at that point. I'd just be like, am I going to catch fly off of you?
My wife said to me, if you were like that, I would not hug you.
No.
I said, thanks, darling.
I'd be like, maybe if I had gloves, I'd just tap your head and just be like, oh, bless you.
Well, Cronenberg apparently he saw this as kind of like an allegory for sort of cancer,
which is interesting because everyone else was like, "Oh, it's AIDS, it's AIDS."
It's AIDS. Yeah, the public at the time when it came out basically thought it was an allegory for AIDS, which he didn't actually.
Wasn't
see.
His intention.
But I mean, not initially, wasn't his intention. No.
I mean, I guess you can draw parallels either way. But it's interesting that the public and the media went in a different direction to the actual director's intentions. Because I know it was the same with Lynch's Dune. They were like, oh, it's AIDS, and that's what they're supposedly, that's why they look the way they do, and it's like, not necessarily. That was necessarily intentional, but sure. It's funny how people just run with these theories, and that's So Cronenberg was thinking cancer here, and I think either apply quite well. So I believe that at this point Stathis sees this video of him puking, and he's like, oh my god, he again still in her fucking apartment.
Exactly. He's let himself in, and he's watching her videos. It's like, dude, boundaries, for fuck's sake. It's like,
so he's now convinced. He's like, okay, this isn't fake, this is truly terrifying. She comes home and immediately like breaks down and says to Stathis, I am pregnant. And he's just like, oh shit. We should probably get you an abortion. She decides that she's going to tell Seth though first. So a little while later, she goes back to see Seth. At which point he shows her his new climbing the ceiling abilities. He's starting to get some superpowers now.
And I like my bathroom cabinet is now the museum
isn't it like Seth Brundle Memorial or something?
Yeah, and it's like when he opens the cabinet and there's like fingers and
all sorts of
it's like,
stuff.
That is disgusting.
And you think by that point that would have started rotting and stinking and
because that's when that's when his ear falls off, because he puts the ear in, doesn't he? He puts it in the cabinet.
He puts it in the cabinet, yeah.
And apparently her expression was genuine. She didn't know that his ear was going to fall off.
Oh, really? That's amazing.
So they that's her genuine expression when it
falls
off.
That's incredible. So he basically then says to her that flies don't have compassion. They don't have feelings. They're aggressive. There's no such thing as insect politics, because insects are violent and direct. And he basically says to her, you need to go because I can feel I'm losing my humanity, and I'm going to hurt you if you stay.
I'll hurt you if you stay.
She then leaves, obviously in tears, goes downstairs to Stathis, who drove her there. And she said, she confesses to him, like, I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him. But this kid needs to fucking go, because I don't know what's going to come out, and I
want this out of my body.
Unbeknownst to them, Seth is on the roof listening in. And he's heard everything she says. So he then knows that she was pregnant. She goes to get.
It's at this point that actually where there's a missing scene that was taken out. So this is at this point you get a scene where Blundell gets a cat and the baboon, and he puts them into the telepods, separate telepods, and he connects it to the third one, and he fuses them together, and what comes out is this horrible amalgamation of baboon and cat. Like one head's at the bottom and the other head's at the other end, and it comes out and it jumps on him and scratches him, and he throws it off, and then he beats it to death with a pole, and then he climbs out of the window and goes up onto the top, and his side starts hurting him, and something starts moving under his flesh, and he basically a little insect leg pokes through his side, and he tears it off and bites it off with his teeth. And it's like that scene was completely cut out, because they thought that if the audience saw him bash this creature to death, they probably would lose all sympathy for him. So it was completely removed. But it's on YouTube. And it is a really well done, gross scene.
I will check that out after this. I've not seen that scene. It sounds incredible, and it sounds gross. Of course, like I said, and again, it's another scene from 1958's The Fly, where he teleports the cat. The cat disappears. Here, horrible amalgamation of a cat and a bloody baboon.
Baboon,
And,
yeah.
Gross. So I forgot to mention, Ronnie has this awesome, horrendous nightmare of giving birth to a giant maggot.
Yes, well, you get the thing about that dream, so the dream sequence is, it starts with them literally driving up, so it's like a really long sequence, and you think,
because you think
wow,
this is happening, yeah. Because also you could be like, oh my god, it's grown really quick inside of her, and like, you know, so as far as the audience is concerned, it's like, oh my god, is this real? Is she like, is it grown really quickly inside of her to where she's like, you know, going to be getting this abortion, and it's already grown like to this huge massive thing. So yeah, she has this nightmare.
Did you notice that the gynecologist was Cronenberg?
It's Cronenberg, yeah, which is amazing. Yeah. That's a great cameo. So
apparently there was something along the lines of I don't know whether it's true or not, but apparently Martin Scorsese wanted to meet him, and he met him, and he said, oh, he just came across as like an LA surgeon, which apparently was what Cronenberg found funny, and which is why he gave him himself that part.
Right. Yeah. So she is going to. She basically says to the doctor, like, it could look normal, but it may be normal to begin with, but then it will change. It needs to go. Yeah, it needs to go. And they persuade this doctor to perform an abortion in the middle of the night. But before she can, Seth abducts her. And
he smashes through this window and
takes her out the window.
Picks her up, drags her out.
Yeah. He takes her back to the warehouse, and he's like, please don't kill him. He might be the last remaining part of Seth Brundle, like the last part of me that you're going to be killing.
Yeah, and his acting here, he's actually so good.
Especially under all that makeup and stuff.
Yeah. It's
he
so
really
sort
well.
of like sad.
Yeah. It's a rare moment.
The eye acting is brilliant.
Yeah, it's another. There's a few moments, like rare moments in this movie where his humanity comes back. And I think it's a really good. It's a really good visual battle you see going on during this movie between the sort of the aggressive, mindless fly, and then the humanity of Seth. And there's moments like this, wonderful moments where Jeff Goldblum really does act his socks off, and gives these really moving performances. So he basically says, you know, don't kill him because it's the last of my humanity. Meanwhile, Stathis breaks into the lab with a shotgun. So he basically says so Stathis breaks in with the shotgun, and Seth just grossly vomits on Stathis's hand and leg. The hand just looks so painful, where it just melts his hand, and then he does the same to his leg.
He does this really good. I mean, his pained acting is fantastic.
Incredible.
His eyes fluttering and stuff, and like his expression is brilliant. His expression is really good.
His expression is amazing, and there is a wonderful, horrific expression on Seth's face where he smiles after he's done the leg, like he's happy he's done it.
Smiling
and it's like, that was like the first time in this movie where it's like, that was an evil thing. Like, it was an evil look. Like, he was happy.
There's another cut one there, because I think there was a scene where you see him eat the foot.
Oh, Jesus.
But they basically cut it out. They cut out the actual eating bit.
Right.
It's horrific enough.
Yeah, there's enough.
You know, it was already horrible, especially with that expression when he's sort of like over it. It's like, oh. Yeah,
so he's then about to basically kill Stathis by vomiting into his face.
Over his face.
Over his head. And then Ronnie convinces him to stop. At which point Seth says, look, I'm going to level with you. This is my plan. We're going to get fused together with the unborn child into one perfect creature. And this will all work fine. Trust me. This will be great. Hear me out.
That sounds great.
Hear me out. Yeah. Hear me out. We're going to fuse into one perfect organism. And he starts dragging her to one of the telepods. She tries to stop him, and we get probably the most amazing practical effect in this movie, where she grabs his jaw, and it all just goes wrong from there. His jaw comes away. And then there's this wonderful shot of his whole face just like
his head
splits and falls apart, showing a much more fly-like creature underneath, still flesh-colored, but a fly shape. And then bits of his skin and legs start falling away.
Yeah, he's just starts. His whole skin starts sloughing off his body.
Off his body, yeah.
He's sort of like you get like the twisted sort of fly legs coming underneath.
You get the impression that he at this point sheds the last of his humanity. You get the impression at this point. You get the impression that he is now completely fly. There's no more Seth.
Yep. No.
And so he drags her into, throws her into the pod.
Throws her into the pod.
He then gets in a pod himself
and then
starts the sequence.
It all up.
But Stathis manages to shoot the wires connecting the pods.
The connection.
Yeah.
So he severs the connection to Veronica.
Yeah.
And
then Seth starts freaking out, trying to break out of the pod.
Sees that. Yeah. So he starts smashing the glass, and he breaks the door open. And as he's climbing through the entrance of the pod, the teleport happens. Yeah. And it teleports him and the door to the pod. I
think the machine says, like,
and the machine says, fusion of Blundellfly and pod successful.
It's like, oh, God. And then he rescues Ronnie, and then the pod opens, and Brundlefly / pod falls out of the pod 3. And starts
crawling his way towards her.
And
she's got she's got the shotgun.
She's got the shotgun, and you see at this point that there is still some of Seth in there when he or some awareness where he grabs the shotgun and puts it to his own head. And then she backs off and she's like, I can't do this.
But he
but she does. I mean, yes. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable agony at this point.
He's just like got these like wires all through him and tubes and stuff, and it's like metal coming out of his back.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, it's so well done.
It's amazing and it's horrible. And it's really moving. And she decides to end his suffering. She shoots shotgun at Seth's head, and it just explodes into pieces. And
which is a fantastic. I mean, brilliant explosion.
It is so
well done.
It's a wonderful shot. And that there we have it. The tragic end of Seth Brundle or Brundlefly by that point. A truly wonderful sci-fi horror, body horror film. It's terrifies me that they're trying to do a remake. There was, of course, The Fly 2 in 1989, directed by Chris Wallace, who did the makeup and creature effects for Gremlins.
The effects guy,
that was a direct
he also did the effects for this.
Oh, did he? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So he it basically is a direct sequel following the son, the unborn son in this movie.
Yep.
And I think Cronenberg was going to do a sequel in 2009, wasn't he? There was kind of announced that he might do a sequel, remake, or something of The Fly.
Yeah, because he really didn't like the Fly 2, which is why he didn't like the script too. That's why he didn't do it.
Yeah, which is fair. I mean, I'm going to rewatch it now because I do have some fond memories of it.
Yeah,
but...
there's a bit I've got. I mean, I haven't seen it. I don't think since it came out. So my memory of it is a bit hazy. But I do remember there being some really great stuff in it.
There's some great practical shots in there, and there are some great moments. I think just the idea that it's ever fixable is kind of a bit like, really, I like the poetic justice ending where this evil, evil boss gets the dog treatment. What he did to the dog happens to him, but they don't kill him, so he has to live out the rest of his life as this mangled thing. Just the idea that he's like, I'm fine now. It's like, really, okay. But it's
okay. I was thinking, there was a early 2000s one on Fox, and they apparently had this trilogy planned, I think, and I think what they planned was to make it more like a proper fly. So he was going to be like a giant winged fly sort of thing, and I think in the second one he was going to go on like a murder spree.
Right.
then it sort of like quietly was taken off the list, and it never happened. So, which I'm kind of glad. But it might have been interesting, but I imagine it would have been fucking awful.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would have done too well. So, The Fly did pretty well. It had an Academy Award, quite rightly, for best makeup.
It did for the effects.
It was nominated for makeup and hair at BAFTAs. It was nominated for best dramatic presentation at Hugo's. I think Goldblum won best actor. At Saturn Awards, they also had best makeup at Saturn Awards, best horror film at Saturn Awards, and they were nominated for everything. So, and rightly so. It's a wonderful film.
I did think it was. It's quite funny. Cronenberg wrote a letter to Vincent Price, saying that he was. Saying he was remaking The Fly, and was he okay with it? And Vincent Price was like really charmed, and he sent him a message back saying that he was okay.
Vincent Price always came across like the nicest man on the goddamn planet.
Perfect gentleman.
Yeah, 100%.
And basically, he did watch the film, but he did say it was okay to a certain part, and then it went too far.
Mm-hmm. a lot of actors from that period have that opinion. I always remember Christopher Lee saying that horror these days is just not horror anymore. His spectacle has gone too far, and I think a lot of those traditional horror actors had that kind of opinion, which is fine. It's a generational thing, isn't it? Horror these days is very different from Vincent Price and those kind of eras.
It is now as well, isn't it? At the moment, I mean, I think
absolutely.
the prevalent stuff at the moment is the ghost stuff, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Which, it goes in cycles. It's like a weird cycle thing that we go through, but
I think we're going to get a lot of low-budget horrors in lockdown. I think there's going to be a lot of people making very low-budget horrors right now, and I think hopefully there'll be some gems coming out at some point.
I hope so. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But in any case, that was The Fly. Can't recommend this one enough. I'm assuming you've already watched it if you're listening to this. But
it's a great film.
Wonderful film. So I guess next time we'll be back to talking and reviewing movies. I'll probably be watching the Craft sequel this weekend, hopefully.
Oh, I've heard such bad things about
So have I, but I'm going to give it a go. The Craft sequel I'm willing to give a shot. The Witcher sequel can fuck off. That's where I'm at. So I'm at least going to give it a go.
That's a straight up reboot, though, isn't it? So the Witches is whereas the Craft is sort of reboot kind of sequel.
Soft reboot. But yes, in any case, we'll be back doing that next time. And until then, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you then.
Bye.